everyone, I am Niharika and welcome back to a new lesson. Well, today we are going to look at the prepositions for, during and while. Well, many of us do get confused while using these prepositions, and in this lesson today we are going to learn how to use them correctly. Well, these prepositions in English represent time, and how they are used, well, let's learn. Now, the first preposition that we are going to look into is for. Now, when do we use the preposition for? Well, for is used when you are talking about or when you're trying to express about how long something goes on or how long someone does something. So, for is that expresses the period of time. The specific time it mentions, like for example, for 2 hours, for 10 years, for 3 weeks. Okay, so this is the way we use the preposition for to express for how long something goes on or for how long someone does something. Now, to understand this better, let's look at an example here. We watched TV for 2 hours last night. So here you're specifically mentioning for how long you watched TV last night. So it's 2 hours, that's a specific time that you've mentioned, and you have used the preposition for. Okay? Now let's look at the second example here. I am going to Spain for 2 weeks. Now again, I'm going to Spain for how long? Well, I am going to Spain for 2 weeks. So here, 2 weeks is the period of time that I am going to go to Spain. And that's exactly the reason why we are using the preposition for. Okay, so I hope that's clear to you. Now let's look at the preposition during. Now, during is used to mention when something happens. Now, just when something happens. You do not use during when you talk about a specific time period. Okay? So it's just when something happens. And the preposition during is always followed by a noun. Okay, it's pretty simple. Now let's look at the example. Nobody was vocal during the presentation. Okay, so now here it says that nobody was vocal during the presentation. So here the presentation is your noun, whereas you are using during to mention what was happening during the presentation. Okay, now we haven't mentioned for how long the presentation went. Okay, so that's why we have not used the preposition for. We are using the preposition during because something is happening. Okay, second example here. I fell asleep. Oh, I'm sorry about that. It's I fell asleep during the film and I slept for an hour. Now here, if you look at the sentence, we have used the preposition during. And also we have used the preposition for. Now let's get the difference here. I fell asleep during the film. So the film was going on and what I did was, well, something happened during the film. So during the film, I fell asleep. So as I mentioned that during is always followed by a noun. Okay, so that's your noun here. And I slept for an hour. So after falling asleep, I almost slept for an hour. So now here you're mentioning the specific time that you were asleep for. Okay, and that's exactly the reason why you are using the preposition for. Right? So that's pretty simple. Now also, many a times people get confused between the preposition during and in. Okay, so now sometimes we end up using in or during in a sentence and you think that we're doing a mistake, but that's not a mistake. It is okay to use in or during interchangeably. For example, well, nobody was vocal in the presentation. So even if you end up using in or during, both are correct. Okay, you're not making a mistake while using these prepositions, right? So now let's have a look at the preposition while. Okay, so now let's understand when and how do we use the preposition while. Well, while is used when we talk about two things at the same time. Okay, so we end up using the preposition while when we talk about two things that happen at the same time. Also remember that while is always followed by a subject and a verb. So it's while okay, so once you understand this, trust me, you will be great when you end up using any of these prepositions. So let's look at the example here. We saw Sam while we were waiting for the bus. So two things. Here you ended up seeing Sam, and the second thing that you're doing is while you were waiting for the bus. So there are two things happening, right? And that's exactly the reason why we end up using the preposition while. Okay, so when two things happen at the same time, we end up using while. Let's look at the second example. I fell asleep while I was watching TV. So again, two things happening at the same time. You fall asleep while you're watching TV. So you're doing two things, right? You're falling asleep and you're watching TV. Hence, we are using the preposition while. And as I mentioned before, that while is always followed by a subject and a verb. So in this sentence, I was watching TV will be your subject and your verb. Okay? Now let's look at the third sentence here. I'll be in London next week. I hope to see John while I'm there. Now, if you look at the sentence here, we have, of course, ended up using the preposition while. But always remember, when you talk about the future, okay? When you talk about the future and you end up using the preposition while, you will always say it in the present tense. Like in the sentence, I'll be in London next week. So that's future, right? Next week is the future. So I'll be in London next week, but I hope to see John while I'm there. But I hope to see John. So here I'm talking present. I hope to see John while I am there. Okay, now if I ended up using the future tense, like I'll be in London next week, I hope to see John while I will be there. Does that sound correct to you? Well, no. That is absolutely incorrect. So make sure when you are talking about future and you end up using the preposition while, you will always talk it in the present tense. Okay? So I hope this is clear to you. This brings me to the end of this lesson. Now it's time to check your knowledge. So go ahead, take a test. Let me know how much did you score. And I'll be back with a new lesson for you. Until then, you take care and have a great day.